Let's get started. Welcome everyone. The first thing I want to say, even before I introduce myself, is thank you to everyone for volunteering, whether this is your first time or whether you have volunteered before and are doing a refresher. This program works because of you. Which is a good segue to my introduction. I am Meg Newman, and I am counsel for the tax section. I wear a number of hats, but today I'm wearing my hat where I work on our pro bono and public interest programs. This, over the last few years, the Virtual Settlement Week program has become one of our most popular and most successful programs. And a large part of that is thanks to our very productive partnership with the Internal Revenue Service Chief Counsel's Office. And I will introduce those, our partners there in a moment who will be helping with the training today. It has also been a success thanks to our many experienced volunteers who participate in the program time and time again and who give freely of their time, not just to help the taxpayers that are involved in the program, but also to provide mentorship, training, and support to new volunteers. So if you are a new volunteer, you can rest assured that you will benefit from the folks that are going to speak today at the training, as well as countless others that we've worked with over the course of this program and who have many of them years of experience volunteering and doing pro bono work and giving freely of their time and talent. So huge note of appreciation for everyone who has offered to share their wisdom in today's training, and then the many dozens, even hundred of folks who participate in these trainings or program on an ongoing basis. And the one other shout out I want to really give before we do our other introductions today, then I'm going to pass it to her, is Michelle Aguirre, who is my right-hand woman and our committee's manager here at the tax section. Without her, this program certainly would not run. She keeps many color-coded, very organized spreadsheets, and she communicates with all of you. She tries to be as responsive as possible. There are many people involved in this program, so many of you have probably already communicated with her. If not, you certainly will. She is a real linchpin of this whole program. So, Michelle, I'll let you introduce yourself so people can see the face behind the emails.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle. I'm the committee manager with the tax section. And you'll probably know me from my email because I send a lot of emails. That's like the primary focus of my job is just emailing. I handle a lot of the kind of admin and logistical aspects on the back end for settlement week. Usually I'm the one who's looking at your registrations and then matching up with cases and coordinating who gets assigned to each case. And then, if you guys have any issues or questions, I'm kind of your first contact point until I find someone who has legal expertise and can actually help. But thank you so much for volunteering. I love all of you guys for volunteering and dedicating so much of your time to this program. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Michelle. Emily, you can go next.
Hi, I'm Emily Yon. I am with the Georgia State College of Law Low-Income Taxpayer Clinic. I have participated in a handful of these, and I'm really excited because I think this is a great thing. And who is next?
Emily is also a vice chair of the tax
Yeah.
section pro bono and tax clinics committee, and so she gives her time as a leader for the tax section as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. So I'll call in Jessica next. Oh, sorry, Jessica Harris.
Hi, I'm Jessica Harris. I'm with the American University Washington School of Law. I'm with their LITC tax clinic. I've been doing this for a couple of years. So it's great to be here to show you guys, give you guys my experience on what it's been like volunteering with the Settlement Week.
Thank you very much. And now we have another Jessica. We're full of Jessicas today. So I want to introduce our two partners that we have here. Sorry, Spencer, I'm going to make you introduce yourself. from the IRS. And like I said earlier, we absolutely cannot do this without them. And I think these trainings are so much more valuable when you can hear directly from them how things work on their side. Otherwise, it can feel a little bit like sort of like an abyss over there. But I wanted all of you to put these wonderful, kind faces with the names on the other side of our partnership. So let's start with Jessica Thomas.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are. My name is Jessica Thomas. I'm an Assistant Associate Area Counsel here at the Office of Chief Counsel. It's a tongue twister of a title. And I'm a member of our National Settlement Day cadre. And I just want to echo what Meg and Michelle have said. Thank you all so much for participating in these events. It's one of my favorite things that we get to do here at Chief Counsel. So thank you guys so much for volunteering. And I will turn things over to Spencer.
Hi, everybody. I'm Spencer Hitt. I'm an associate area counsel with Chief Counsel in Louisville and been involved with the Settlement Day, the ABA National Settlement Day program since we started it back in 2019, I believe. And just again, thank you again for participating. One of the highlights of my job is just to hear the feedback from taxpayers when they get their matters resolved through these events and are just generally happy that they can talk with pro bono reps and just feel the relief of getting all this out of the way. And the ABA and your volunteerism is what making that happen. So again, thank you for that.
Excellent. Well, those are our speakers for today. And now we're going to launch into some of the logistics, and then we'll talk about more substantive stuff as we move forward. So we're a little bit behind schedule, so I'll go through this quickly. But if you're here, it means you have signed up to volunteer. Michelle does an yeoman's work, I believe is the phrase, trying to find a case for as many people as possible. It is true that most times we are not able to match every single person who volunteers just based on scheduling restraints and how many cases we get. So if you don't get a case this time, please, 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 I beg of you, please sign up for a future one. We will prioritize people who signed up and didn't get a case, in one virtual settlement week for the next one. But we are able to match the majority of people who sign up, so that should happen. I'll let Michelle in a second talk about the logistics of how exactly that works, in terms of timing and such. My first topic was, what is the general time commitment? And that is sort of a loaded question, I would say. It's supposed to be that you are committing to the prep work that would, talking to the client before, sorry, to the taxpayer, not client, before the session. That can happen in one call. Sometimes it takes multiple calls. Sometimes there's some follow-up work after the calls to prepare for the settlement meeting. And then the settlement meeting, and then that would be it. Now, and we'll talk about this again later in the training. There is no obligation that you continue with this case after the settlement conference. It is optional. I would say, some thing like 2/3 of the cases get resolved. That's not probably not all of those happen during the during the session. Some people do choose to continue with the cases even without taking on formal representation. Some people do choose to take on formal representation. Some volunteers choose to refer the case to the local LATC if they're eligible. And some people just say, I've sort of taken you this far. Here's what you need to do to finish the sort of homework that you need to do on your end to wrap up the case, and the taxpayer can kind of do that on their own. So there are a lot of different paths that these cases can take. So it's hard to say what the exact time commitment is, but the time that you have absolutely signed up for would be the meeting itself and somewhere between 1 and 3 prep calls, which hopefully shouldn't take too long prior to it. So it should be minimal, a defined commitment that you're making. And if you ever find that, well, first of all, you have teammates to lean on. And second of all, if you find that you feel left with more work than you meant to sign up for, please do contact Michelle. She is happy to help find other people to help you out, find referral sources. We have lots of other folks that you can talk to as well who've been down this road before who can give suggestions on how to sort of remove yourself from the time commitment. In terms of assigning cases, we match people based on the experience that they provided in your registration form. So if you indicated, even if you indicated that you have a lot of experience as a tax lawyer, if it's not necessarily in the controversy space, or if it's not in with middle or low income pro bono clients, or if it's not with individual clients, you will get assigned someone who does have that experience. So Michelle color codes everyone, and so there'll be one person in the sort of like most experienced category, one person in like a middle experienced category, and then usually we also put someone who's brand new to this work, maybe brand new to being a lawyer, maybe not even a lawyer. We do also have students. Many of the students who participate in the program participate through low income tax clinics, and so they will be there with their professors, so you might not encounter them, but we do also have LLM students and other JD students who are just interested in getting exposed to what does tax work look like. To me, that's one of the benefits of the program is enabling would-be tax lawyers to see what practicing tax law looks like. They obviously cannot provide legal advice, of course, but they can observe, they can do background research, and if you are on a team, even if you're the sort of middle person on the team, with someone who is either a new lawyer or not yet a lawyer, I encourage you, if possible, I encourage you to reach out to them and talk to them about your practice, talk to them about the experience of being a tax lawyer, because that's one of the really cool parts of this program too, is that we're able to share the love of tax law with new lawyers and with soon-to-be lawyers. That's generally how the matching works. Then Michelle, in terms of matching them with matching each group with a taxpayer, most of it is based on scheduling. So Michelle tries to find a time that you're available that matches up with when one of the taxpayer meetings has been scheduled. And those cases come directly from Jessica and Spencer. They send us a spreadsheet saying, here's the case. They give us a little bit of information about it, which they can talk about later, and the time of the end day of the meeting, and that is primarily what Michelle uses to match people with cases. She and I both look at the type of case and your background. So the top person on the case, the most experienced person, if it's a case that involves like low income credits, such as like the earned income tax credit or any other type refundable type credits, things like that, we'll make sure that someone who has done that kind of work is on the cases in the team. If it's something that's completely unrelated to that, we have a lot of unreported income cases, things like that, then it may just be someone who has experience working with individual controversy matters, because they don't necessarily need to know the ins and outs of the earned income tax credit if it's not involved in the case. So there's a little bit of substantive matching that happens as well. But we only have so much information about the case. I think I covered everything in this section, and I'm going to pass it off to Jessica Thomas, to talk about how the cases are selected on the IRS. It's on Chief Counsel's side.
Thank you. So I'll cover the main points, mainly who you all are going to be working with, the types of cases that these individuals select, um, uh, and just kind of where in the life cycle of a tax court case these cases are. So in terms of the people that you're going to be working with, you are going to work with my besties here in Chief Counsel, the attorneys and paralegals in the litigation and advisory division of Chief Counsel. So they are the ones that are taking a look at their case inventory, and they're deciding for themselves what sort of cases are ripe for settlement day. The first requirement, of course, is that these taxpayers are pro se individuals. So they will take a look at their case inventory, and from there, they will decide which of their pro se cases would be really good candidates to attend settlement day. We would not be able to do this event alone here in Chief Counsel. And so we also enlist the services of other individuals within the Internal Revenue Service. So when an attorney or a paralegal submits a case for a conference, they will check off a box as to whether or not they need revenue officer support, or TCS or tax computation specialist, that sort of support. So the job of the revenue officer is they can assist with explaining collection alternatives. What is an installment agreement? What is an offer in compromise? What is CNC, or currently not collectible status? And they can also do some additional work, and they'll work beforehand, usually with the attorney or paralegal, to see whether or not this taxpayer is eligible for any sort of these collection alternatives. And they will come to the conference, and that is something that you as a volunteer and the taxpayer can discuss. Um, what I can tell you about these revenue officers, they are wonderful people. They are super enthusiastic. Oftentimes, they're fighting to get into these conferences. So they are also super excited to help and assist with our event. In addition to the revenue officers, we also may enlist the help of tax computational specialists, and they can provide expedited computations for conferences if that is something that you need. In terms of the types of cases that we select here in Chief Counsel, the first thing I like to say, besides it being that they need to be pro se, is there's no specific dollar value or dollar limit that we impose on our attorneys or paralegals. What I like to tell everyone is this a case that you can reasonably settle or get close to settling within that conference appointment time that we have, which is about 2 hours? If the answer is yes, then invite that to settlement day. Primarily, we see, S cases, so cases below 50,000 that are invited to settlement day. But sometimes we see cases that may be a little bit higher in dollar value if the issue isn't super complicated. So, for example, I had a case that I invited a couple settlement days ago where the deficiency was a little bit over 100,000, but there was only one issue, and that was the home sale exclusion. What made matters a little bit more complicated was that this taxpayer sold his home because he moved to another continent that was like 12 hours ahead of the US. And so that was really great because we were able to get him to conference and we were able to settle just because there was really only one main issue that was involved. So those are the types of, so that's the first thing in terms of if you're wondering if there's any specific dollar limitation that we see. In terms of the types of cases, we kind of see the gamut of the types of cases that are invited to settlement day. You will see deficiency cases. If you love collection due process cases or CDP cases, you're welcome. We have a bunch this upcoming settlement day week. If it's not your fave, I'm sorry, there are a bunch. CDP cases, we have innocent spouse cases, and we also have passport cases that we may invite as well. And then the last point, in terms of the life cycle of where exactly is this case that we're inviting to the conference, it can kind of range. A lot of these cases, I can speak personally for my office in Houston. A lot of the cases that tend to get invited from my office, they're in trial prep status, right? So the case has come back from appeals as unagreed, or maybe the taxpayer didn't was unresponsive in appeals. So it's back to us for trial prep. Maybe it's on a calendar. So my office colleagues tend to invite those cases to settlement day. You also have cases that may still be in appeals. I also like to tell my colleagues is, hey, even if a case is in appeals, if you think that they may benefit from coming to settlement day, please invite them to settlement day. Of course, we do get authorization from appeals as well as the taxpayer to participate. So that is another stage in the life cycle of a case that may be invited to settlement day. And then sometimes you may have a case. Oh, I hope that's not too much feedback. That was just answered. If it's a easy kind of case that we think that may benefit from coming to settlement day, then we might invite that case to come to settlement day as well. So that's kind of typically the types of cases that you may see as you guys volunteer for settlement week.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the nature and scope of the conference itself. I think Jessica touched on a little bit of things I wanted to talk about in this particular section, which is, the conference is 2 hours usually. So when you are in the conference, your purpose is to, again, work on the remaining issues and discuss the remaining issues that could possibly be resolved. Usually, and we'll talk about this later in the agenda, we'll to try to discuss everything with the taxpayer prior to the conference to see what issues are remaining and how we can resolve that. And so when you're in the conference, your representation is pretty much limited to the conference time. I mean, well, I would say before the conference and then the conference, and then usually once the conference is over, then your representation is over with the client. But while you are there, again, your purpose is to sit here and work with IRS counsel and speak with IRS counsels on what you guys have decided as far as what the remaining issues should be worked out or how it should be worked out or what the client has pretty much decided as far as how they want to move forward with the case. And so that is your purpose. So when you do come into the conference, I would suggest or advise to come in ready to present your, I guess, your issues and to present how you want to resolve the issues. And then from there, you guys will start a conversation as to how that will happen or if it will happen at all. And again, it just depends on, particular IRS counsel that you are interacting with. And so with the conference, I would just say come prepared if you're able to. And again, like I said, we're going to talk about a little bit later on the agenda as far as how how you would contact your taxpayer. But I would just advise, like, when you come into the conference, be ready to discuss the issues and discuss how you want to resolve it. And then if you don't have an opportunity to talk to the taxpayer before the conference, and then IRS counsel will give you opportunity to do that at the beginning of the meeting, right? So they'll give you the opportunity to talk to them and take a little time to talk to the taxpayer, and then you guys will discuss whether or not they want to resolve the issue or what they want to say moving forward. And then from there, again, like I said, you'll interact with IRS counsel on how to, go move forward with the particular conference.
Excellent. Thank you, both Jessicas. The next logistical sort of topic I want to discuss is that this is meant as a limited scope engagement. This is not meant for you to be signing a 2848 and becoming, moving into a that type of relationship with a client where they expect that you are representing them. Make that very clear when you talk to them. And then Michelle, I believe you can confirm, will send you or has already sent you, I think, some of the sample forms that we always provide before the virtual settlement weeks. One of those is an example of a conflict form. Now that came from a specific law firm that was willing to share with us the conflict form that they use for limited scope engagements such as this one. So we just scrubbed their firm name off of it and used exactly the form that they use. It's a big law firm and it works for them. So I think it works for a lot of other people too. But feel free to use if your firm or you personally or your LITC or what have you has a different type of conflict form that you need to use, feel free to do that. I wouldn't think that, this particular law firm, informed us that for limited scope engagements, they wouldn't do a full conflict check because they're not actually entering into an attorney-client relationship with the taxpayer, which frankly I think is one of the draws of the program. And so what we share with you is is that example of a conflict form. And then I'm going to let Jessica and Spencer talk about the form that we share on the IRS side, and anything that they might need in order for you to contact the client. In order for you to get information from the client, obviously you need permission from the client. I keep saying client, I mean to say taxpayer. In order to get that information and to address their issues in this limited capacity, in this limited scope capacity.
So I think the most important form for all of you that we will need is the tax information authorization for U.S. tax court petitioners. Hopefully they can shorten that one day. Once you fill out that form, I mean, I think it's pretty easy, and you send that to us. That gives everyone here in council, whether the case is being handled by an attorney or paralegal, to be able to start sending you documents. At minimum, it's the petition, the answer, and the notice, whether that may be a notice of deficiency or a notice of determination, for example. And the earlier that you can get that to us, I think the better. I think it helps to make the conferences go a lot smoother. And easy. But of course, we know life happens. I will tell you that I tell everyone here in council, if the pro bono volunteers haven't had a chance to speak with the taxpayers ahead of time, then please work with the volunteers as much as you can to get that sign off. If that's, during the conference that you sign off, then we'll give you some time during the conference to kind of meet separately once we get that permission from the taxpayer. So you can take a look at any documents we have, whether that be, again, for example, the notice, the petition, the answer at a minimum. So that's kind of what we need here on our side.
Perfect. And we share that document along with the sample conflict form when you first volunteer. So you should have all that information already. And I should note that I think you only need one per taxpayer, even if you have 3 people on your team, correct?
Yes.
Right. Okay. So one person, so you will have to coordinate, and we'll talk about this later in the working with a partner section, but you will have to coordinate with your team on that. I'm going to pass it off to Emily to talk a bit about some of the more common cases that she has worked on. Jessica Thomas did list some of them, which is super helpful in terms of what the IRS mostly sees when they're referring these cases over. But Emily, I don't know if you want to talk about some of the experiences that you've had, and Jessica Harris as well. And then, we can also mention some other types of common cases.
Sounds good. Well, hopefully no one is feeling too overwhelmed right now. And talking about the cases, I know it can be a little bit intimidating, particularly if you don't have a lot of experience with tax controversy. But that's one of the biggest benefits of working with teams. Like Meg has said, I mean, they are trying to pair people up in groups that likely have had some of the experience. So you're generally not going to be hit with anything that no one in your group has worked on before. But I was also going to mention some resources. So if it is something you don't have a lot of experience, that you don't need to feel too intimidated if that is the case. Because again, like Jessica mentioned, these are going to be cases that are good for settlement. So they're not trying to give you overly difficult cases that they don't think are likely to settle. But like Jessica mentioned, I would say a lot of cases that you are going to see are going to be unreported income. So maybe they have, DoorDash, something like that, that they just didn't report that 1099 income. The biggest issue with cases like that are going to be getting the documentation for expenses. If you have something DoorDash, Uber, that's often a little bit easier for them to log into their account and get the information. It can be a little bit more challenging when you have someone that it's more the traditional Schedule C and their expenses, maybe they reported their income, but their expenses were disallowed. So I would say that's a big chunk of what you will see. And you might also see some family-based credits. So I would say one of the big things with sorts of tools that you have at your disposal, hopefully you have access to the effectively representing your taxpayer before the IRS. Because if it's something that you haven't seen before, that's going to basically cover any type of case that you would see in settlement week. But I understand, I know it's available on Westlaw, and not everyone is going to have access to that. I will say, and I tell my students this all the time, the IRS website is actually really helpful. So that's always a great place to start if you are not familiar with the information. So the IRS website, I am a big fan of IRS publications. You can basically Google anything, IRS publication earned income credit, and find the publication that's going to go through all of the requirements for the earned income credit. And it's also going to have a lot of really good examples. So there is a lot of information at your disposal. Meg also mentioned earlier, if it is something that no one in the group is familiar with, please, please, please reach out and let Meg and Michelle know. They can put you in touch with someone that is willing to assist. I will put my email in the chat, but I work at a low income taxpayer clinic, so this is the type of stuff we do a lot of the time. And so there are wonderful people in this field, and they are more than willing to help. So don't feel intimidated and just kind of stuck. Reach out, and you can definitely get the help that you need. So I can also put just some example of publications you may need. I know sometimes you get slightly more unique things. I know in one of our cases, we had a gambling issue, and that I know a lot of low income taxpayer clinics deal with gambling issues a lot. We at Georgia State don't. But again, there's a lot of great information out there on the IRS website to catch up pretty quickly. So, Jessica, did you want to add anything on the types of issues before we move on to exchanging documents?
No, I agree. Another issue that I've seen is innocent spouse. I've had that issue before, but other than that, she pointed out everything that I used to, help prepare for the case. I did have an issue on stocks, and I went onto the IRS website. I looked everything up, so it was useful and it was great. And also, I asked other people for their opinion on how to handle the issue. But like, there's a lot of resources out there, so definitely don't feel like you have to do it on your own. But,
Yeah, I would just
Okay.
add that because these are not limited, as Jessica Thomas said earlier, because there's no income limitation as you would have with a case from an LATC, you will see a broader range of issues that affect different types of taxpayers. So just be prepared for that. But as I said before, Michelle and I try to pair people maybe in the private sector with some of the cases that you might not see as often at an LATC or in a pro bono space.
but it was a great experience. I learned a lot and I loved it.
Exactly.
So.
It's a great way to learn about something new. Exactly.
Meg,
Yes.
I'll just say too, if you ask the chief counsel attorney, they will give you their opinion of what the issue is. So
Mhm.
you don't have to research everything. You only have to research the narrow thing that they think is an issue in the case too.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were moving on to exchange of documents, and that's exactly what I was going to mention. I always ask IRS, I say, what do you need to resolve this case? And again, we all want to get the settlement, and they are more than willing to say, this is what we need. And so they are not trying to make it difficult. They want to work with you, they want to work with the taxpayer, they want to get this settled. Just, we're all on the same page on that. So asking what they need and what they see the issues, that's going to really, like Spencer was saying, direct what your research needs to be. Because a lot of times if you get the, notice of deficiency, there may be multiple issues, but they may have dealt with most of those already, which kind of goes into communicating with your client. So in that initial phone call with the client, I always like to ask, what do you think the issue is? Just to kind of get their perspective on it and get an idea of what sorts of information they've provided to the IRS and how that interactions have been going. Because I'm sure it's of no surprise. Sometimes they're like, oh no, I haven't worked with anyone. They haven't contacted me at all. And then you talk to the IRS and they're like, no, we've, tried to contact them multiple times and they've just basically ignored us after our initial conversation. So getting an idea of what it is that's at issue and then working on what sorts of documents you need to be able to prove that. Because again, a lot of times you're going to see things with Schedule C. And so it's going to be a lot of business expenses, bank statements, and all of that. And so it's really difficult to do a lot of this and get the settlement, the actual decision document, if you're not able to get the documentation from the client. So the sooner that you can reach out to the client to start that process, the better. I know Meg had mentioned sometimes not all of the settlements are able to get resolved. And, I've been in settlements to where we are trying to get the documents and we end up having to work with IRS to reschedule the conference to maybe the following week. So the taxpayer has time to get the documentation so we can actually say, hey, they were, these are the documents to show they actually had this business income, and these are the corresponding expenses that they claimed. And so that can be a big one. One of the things with exchanging documents, I had an experience where it was someone that bought and sold things on, like, they bought the stuff on Amazon, sold it on like Etsy or eBay or something like that. When you have clients that are good with technology, that makes everyone's life easier because in that situation, they had Excel spreadsheets that they had downloaded from all of the transactions, but they didn't have the documentation. And so IRS wanted to see to make sure that those numbers actually corresponded. So we were over Zoom. And the taxpayer shared their computer screen. They logged into the accounts. The IRS attorney had them pull up like 5 or 7 different transactions just to make sure that the spreadsheet looked correct. They saw enough information with the, 5 or 7 transactions they double checked and they were like, okay, I feel comfortable that this, document was downloaded from this information. There is all of the documentation from Amazon to show the, expense and then the sale. And we were able to settle doing it that way. So again, when they are able to share the screen or something like that, that makes everyone's life easier. But that's not always the case. Jessica, do you want to add anything with the initial phone calls with the client? I guess just real quick before, again, one of the things too is a lot of times the taxpayer, they have a really good claim and you can prove it, but that's not always the case, right? We know sometimes they go to a bad preparer, they made an innocent mistake. A big part, I think, of what we do and why our assistance is so beneficial is to be able to have the conversation with the client and say, our client, I do that too, the taxpayer and say, hey, this is why you aren't eligible. This is why what you claim as a business was actually a hobby. This is what you have to show. And we just can't reach that, standard. The IRS, they're disallowing it. And, we agree with them. You don't qualify for this. And a lot of times they feel better when it's not the IRS telling them, it's us confirming that the IRS is correct and that they don't actually qualify. And Jessica Thomas mentioned collections. I always think it's really helpful in those conversations. It's always easier when they're a low income taxpayer because they have so many more collection alternatives. But to explain, hey, just, our goal here is to get to the correct liability through the decision document. But that's not the end of the process. Just because you owe this large amount, the IRS is willing to work with you depending on your financial situation. So I'll have a conversation about, offers and compromise, installment agreements currently not collectible, because a lot of times, it's not the fact that they owe that they're upset about, it's the fact that they can't pay. And so they're a lot more willing to settle when we have that conversation.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point that we get a lot of feedback on this. So I just wanted to add to what Emily said. We hear a lot of people say, some of these cases just aren't winnable. And I guess what I want to say is, twofold. One is I really think that what we're doing is helping the tax system, right? If some of these unwinnable cases don't show up in front of a judge at tax court, that saves the court time. We're helping the tax system here. Two, we're providing the taxpayer with, Emily said sometimes they're upset about not being able to pay. Sometimes they're upset about not feeling heard. Whether that's true or not, Spencer and Jessica, I'm sure, are very good at listening. But sometimes people just feel that they keep trying to explain what happened and how they ended up where they are, and they keep getting, the response they keep getting is no, 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 and that's not right. And sometimes it isn't right. A lot of times it isn't. Like the position they've taken is not correct and is not defensible. But to feel heard and to have their pro bono attorney, someone who's in their court, who's listening to them and saying, I see why you thought that. I understand this is what you're telling me. This is how you got to where you are. I hear you and I understand. And you're not a bad person. You're not dumb. But however, we need to figure out how to move on from here. Okay. And we know you're not going to do this in the future and whatever, and, move forward. And I think a lot of people feel like that's a really valuable, affirming experience. And it's something that you can provide for these taxpayers, that I think is really valuable, even if it's not quote unquote winnable. The other point I'll make is that if you have participated in a lot of these, or if your partner who is more senior to you in their experience level has done a lot of these and they find that they continue to be assigned cases that are not winnable, please do let me and Michelle know. We're happy to try to find you a something that looks on its surface to maybe be a little bit more fulfilling. We have had that feedback before, and we've tried for our veteran volunteers to guess as best as we can what might be at least a meatier issue, something, even if it's not in the end something that you discover that the position that the taxpayer has taken really isn't particularly defensible. At least you learn something new in the process. Like Jessica Harris said earlier, at least you or your students, if you are working with students, learn about a new area of tax law that you weren't familiar with before. So that can be an enriching experience as well. But I encourage folks to go into this with eyes wide open, not to think that, oh, this IRS attorney gave me this case knowing that there was like nothing we could do about it and they just didn't want to deal with the taxpayer. A lot of the time, it's not that they don't want to deal with the taxpayer, it's that the taxpayer is not feeling like they can really interact with the attorney for whatever reason. There's nothing that they can really do about the fact that they are the government and we are not. And so this is like there are social work elements to this, and as much as there are legal elements to this. So please do keep that in mind and remember that we're all here for the system.
Yeah, and I just agree with everyone said. And also, when you're at this point, they've already had an opportunity to try to settle with appeals and then also try to settle with the IRS counsel. So when it comes to us, we're like the last resort to like tax, to go into tax, actually going to trial. And so just remember that, like, I would say don't get discouraged. I don't think of it as winnable. It's just that you're helping them get to another step of maybe possibly going, when they actually go to trial, they say, you know what? This person actually said something that makes sense and had time to think about it and then I am willing to settle. I don't know if that actually happens or not, but hopefully it does because sometimes, it does take a while to get people to get things through their head as far as this is just not something that's going to happen. But at least you're helping them out and maybe you can give them further advice for after the tax court. And that's what I usually do is I provide them advice beyond trial and say, hey, if this does happen, then you can do X, Y, and Z. And then you can always, reach out to a LITC or wherever else to get assistance with that. And so I just want to add a little bit to it.
Excellent. All right. Do you guys want to talk a little bit about the process of exchanging documents, the sort of technical aspects? I'll add Jessica Thomas here as well on the IRS side.
Yeah, I mean, I think the document, I mean, that can always be a difficult thing. But again, like has been mentioned, if you can work quickly and get all of the documents to the IRS so they can release the information, that's going to be a big thing. But Jessica Thomas, do you want to add how that can help or?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Spencer had mentioned before. Us here in council, we want to give you whatever you need to help, make your conference be as productive as that is. And so, like I mentioned before, at a minimum, that's the petition and the notice. But whatever else you may need, I've had past volunteers be like, hey, Jessica, I know it's the ninth hour, but could you run a bunch of these transcripts for me? Can I get, their account transcript? I have no problem doing that. And the same with my colleagues here. We want to give you whatever you may need, to help the taxpayer kind of explain what's going on. I think Jessica and Emily mentioned it before. We kind of will focus on what exactly the main issue is. So, like if I, for example, am sending a notice of deficiency, I might be like, hey, volunteer, here's what was on the notice of deficiency. Here's the income they're missing. That I just need, maybe it was retirement income. I just need to see their 1099-R or something that says they got this. And so we are going to do our best here on council side to make things easy for you with regards to what we send you. And if there's anything that you need, then please let us know and we will try and get that to you if we can.
Great. Is there anything else on that while we're on that topic and while you have the floor there, Jessica Thomas, is there anything else you wanted to add about, best practices of working with the IRS? And then we can talk about internal partner interactions.
Yeah, I would just say if you are able to meet with the taxpayer ahead of time and you've been able to narrow down the issues, if you can get documentation prior to the conference. I think that helps to make things go a little easier in terms of the conference. Of course, I know life happens. And so if that's not the case, I mean, we will work with what we have, what's in front of us. I think just another best practice is just, communication on both ends, right? And so if you are not able to get in touch with the council attorney or paralegal, reach out to Meg and Michelle. They will reach out to me. And I'm like Liam Neeson and Taken. I will find them, right? I'm here in council. I will hit them up in Teams and be like, hey, what's going on? Please reach out, right? So I think, communication is key. We want the best outcome for both parties in terms of these events. So I just think, that's kind of one of the best practices that you can do as you guys volunteer next week.
And just to kind of add to that, I always check with the council that I'm working with to see how they prefer the documentation. A lot of times they prefer fax if possible, since it's a little bit more secure than email. But if it's email, particularly if the client has emailed me something, I may take the steps to password protect it before I send it to council's office, just to like add a layer to that. Although I know I occasionally have trouble with, for whatever reason, with council's office and the password protection. There sometimes are issues with the password actually working. But again, we all work together to make sure that happens. If it's something that has to be exchanged at the actual conference, I've always had really good luck with the IRS giving us, like moving us to a breakout room or stepping away to give us time during that actual conference to talk to the taxpayer about what they've been able to provide. And
That's great. Are there any other logistics in terms of the meeting itself? Have any of you had problems with Zoom or with other, sort of technical aspects? Do you have any other tips of how to troubleshoot, working with taxpayers and working with IRS on, the virtual component of this program?
I can add real quick. I mean, I think it's always ideal when we have, the connection, we can all do things with our cameras on, but a lot of times that's not possible with the taxpayers. Sometimes it's a technology thing. Sometimes it's more of an internet thing. A lot of times I've dealt with taxpayers that live in more rural areas and their connection just isn't good. So they have to call in on their phone. That's perfectly fine. Again, everyone on both sides has always been really flexible. If it actually has to be like a landline phone call, or a three-way phone call or something like that, I've had conferences that get resolved that way too, where it's just over the phone and not even Teams or Zoom or anything like that.
Great, that's really helpful. Thanks, Emily. All right, well, Emily and Jessica Harris, we're running out of time, so why don't you talk a bit about engaging with your partners and then some best practices around engaging with the taxpayers.
I mean, one of the best things is working with partners, but that can also be a struggle a little bit in itself. So generally, a lot of times I've done it where there's three of us, and it can be who is going to take the lead. So generally, it's going to be the person with the most experience, but that's not always possible. Maybe if the person with the most experience is also the busiest, and so the person taking the lead needs to be the person that has the most time to actually reach the taxpayer. Again, it's always great if the entire group can talk to the taxpayer, but with everyone's schedule, that's just not always the most realistic situation. Thankfully, with emails after phone calls, that can keep everyone on the same page. To add, since I am a academic clinician, a lot of times you get the wonderful opportunity to work with students, and I think it's really important to make them feel involved. While they can't necessarily directly contact the taxpayer and do work that way, they can be on the calls. They can serve great for researching things. Particularly, they're in law school, so they have good access to Westlaw and Lexis and all of that you may no longer have access to. So I think it's a really great opportunity to work with a law student and a good experience for them.
Yeah, I agree with partners. I think I only had one case with partners where you have to sometimes maybe take charge, just depending on who has the most availability. And then I also work with law students, and so I usually give them the space to reach out to the clients and then, help with the work. And so it usually works out really well for the taxpayer. And then as far as getting in contact with the taxpayer, sometimes it can be difficult. It depends on the taxpayer. Some are ready to go, and then some are they just drift off in the wind. You don't know what's going on. But the conference is coming up, so it's like, okay, we're gonna come to the conference. It is what it is. This is what's gonna happen. And so, if you're not able to get in contact with a taxpayer beforehand, just come to the conference ready to go. IRS counsel, if they sign the tax release information form, you have the issues already. Like we said, contact them. You already kind of have an idea of what needs to happen. So just come in ready to go and then ready to talk to the taxpayer on the side and then try to resolve as much as you possibly can. But I like to, if I'm able to get in contact with a taxpayer, I like to at least try to talk to them at least twice before the conference. Once just to get the information that I need to figure out what's going on from their end and get their side of the story, and then go through the documents and do the research I need to do. And then the next call is, this is what's going to happen. This is what my advice is going to be. And then if they don't like it, then I schedule another call and then maybe another call. And I'm like, look, you gotta, you gotta get this through. I get what you're saying and I understand you don't agree, but this is what's going to happen. And so like, make sure you can, if you have the possibility to do it, schedule as many calls as you possibly can between the time you're assigned the taxpayer into the conference. So that way everything you get narrowed down. So when you come to the conference, you're ready to go.
And I'll just make two other points. One, if you are let's say you're the middle or the less experienced person on your team, and you know that you know that, and we've had this before where the team has been anxious to contact the taxpayer or participate in planning for the meeting and the research and such because they feel unprepared and they are having trouble hearing back from the more experienced partner on their team. Please let Michelle know as soon as possible and she can reassign someone else so that you can make sure you feel comfortable. That doesn't happen very often, but it does happen sometimes and it can be really stressful. So if you feel like the two people that are responding are the two people who have the least experience on your team, that's not great. So we have lots of people like Emily and Jessica Harris here who are willing at the last minute to jump in. Susan Morgenstern, who's our vice chair for pro bono, is also always willing to have a prep call with you, make sure you're doing okay, participate. She's also really good, and this goes to sort of Emily's point earlier. She's really good about she'll let the person who's like the middle experienced person, take the lead and she'll prep them in advance, which can be nice too. Because that way that person gets more of an experience doing it hands-on. And, a lot of folks, and hopefully some of you here, who maybe haven't had as much experience will go through the virtual settlement week experience maybe once or twice and then feel comfortable taking cases on their own from their local LATC and actually representing taxpayers that way. That is sort of one of the potential goals of the program. And so if you are a more experienced person on your team, letting the less experienced people, explaining, using it as a teaching moment, letting them take the lead and sort of being there to support in case something goes wrong can be helpful too because it provides that, sort of training. Sort of like in a medical environment, like, I mean, I was the pit, so I'm like definitely an expert in how medical students are taught. So something similar to that. Excellent. All right, we're coming to the end of our time. Does anyone, Jessica, Emily, Spencer, Michelle, does anyone have any final thoughts before I give a couple wrap up comments and we let people go? Is there anything that we missed here? Well, for everyone who's participating, please know that you can reach out to me, to anyone who spoke here today with questions. Again, your first line of defense should definitely be the person on your team who's most experienced. They're the first person that you would ask for advice or guidance, but Michelle and I are a good backup for that. If we don't know the answer, we're happy to connect you with people who do. And then before we go, I would be remiss if I didn't add a quick pitch for the tax section. So if you are a tax lawyer and you are not a member of the American Bar Association or a member of the tax section, highly recommend that you join. Happy to talk to you about the benefits. We have 36 different committees. One of them is our pro bono committee. 35 of them require you to join the tax section to participate in their listservs and actively participate in the committees. The pro bono committee, as a public service matter, has their listserv open to the public. So anyone here is welcome to join that listserv. If you'd like more information about how to do that, Michelle will happily share it with you. The listserv is really helpful. Emily and Jessica, I know, are both on it, and it is very active. People share questions and resources, job openings, all sorts of things. So it's a really great resource if you're interested in doing pro bono work. And even if you're not a member of the tax section, you can join that listserv, and I highly recommend that you do. We also announce each of the virtual settlement weeks and the registration for that on the listserv as well. We also have the tax section also has a number of other programs. We have fellowships for recent law school graduates and for more senior law school graduates doing public service work. We have scholarships to our meetings for LATC folks, and each of our meetings does feature CLE related to pro bono work. So much more substantive than what we got into today about very specific issues related to low income taxpayers. So join the tag section or participate in the trainings. And we do also have a virtual meeting in the fall. So if you aren't able to travel for meetings, you can get some CLE even if you're not even if you're not a member of the tax section, you can join us virtually there. And and one more final plug would be at our May meeting. We are going to do a mock virtual settlement week session. So that will be a much more substantive training than what we're doing here. You'll get the opportunity to meet with a fictional client and have a fictional meeting with a IRS attorney. There will also be a panel at the beginning to talk about best practices in a more substantive way than what we've done here. So if you can come to that, that'll only be in person at our May meeting in DC, May 7th to 9th. So consider registering and joining us, and you can participate in that meeting on Thursday. All right. Thank you all for joining, and we will also post the recording for this session on the website and share it with volunteers. So good luck, everyone, and thank you to our speakers.